To the COP27 climate talks in Egypt now, and elation over a landmark compensation deal has been tempered by disappointment over progress on cutting emissions and fossil fuels. Let's take a look at what the summit did and didn't achieve. Now, there was no agreement on phasing out fossil fuels anytime soon. Delegates did, however, reaffirm a commitment to the goal of keeping global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. And there was a loss and damage deal that will compensate vulnerable nations suffering from climate change.
It's a historic deal, thrashed out by exhausted delegates after weeks of negotiations at the climate talks in Egypt.
Today, here in Sharm el-Sheikh, we established the first ever dedicated fund for loss and damage, a fund that has been so long in the making.
The fund would pay poorer nations on the front lines of climate change, dealing with destruction and death from extreme weather. Developing countries have contributed the least to heat-trapping emissions that are causing temperatures to increase worldwide. Nations like Pakistan, where floods have killed hundreds this year alone, have been campaigning for this compensation for decades.
The establishment of a fund is not about dispensing charity. It is clearly a down payment on the longer investment in our joint futures. It is a down payment and an investment in climate justice.
But as some delegates celebrate, crucial details are still unclear, like exactly which richer countries will pay into the fund and how much. And there was little progress on tougher cuts to carbon emissions, the gases produced by burning fossil fuels that are driving climate change. Europe is among the big emitters, and Germany has pledged to cut its emissions, but warned that other top polluters aren't doing the same. It's more than frustrating to see overdue steps on mitigation and the phase-out of fossil fuels prevented by some major emitters and oil-producing countries. As a result, the world loses precious time towards the path of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees. A sentiment shared by many delegates leaving the conference.
Alex Scott leads the Climate Diplomacy and Geopolitics programme at E3G. That's a climate change think tank, and she joins us now from London. Welcome to DW, Alex. This deal to compensate poorer nations is widely being called historic. Do you think it's historic?
I think it is historic. This has been 30 years of campaigning from climate vulnerable countries and from civil society groups. I think there are a couple of things that are historic about it. One is getting the agreement from the developed countries to create this fund. This is something that until 2 years ago was heavily blocked, particularly by the US. There's been a change of administration in the US that's played some part in unblocking the tensions over talking about finance for loss and damage, but also the huge ramp up of climate impacts that we've all experienced over the last few years, I think has played a part as well.
Now, the
other historic thing about it...
Sorry, go ahead.
The other historic thing about it, I think, is also within this deal, there's a big call on international finance institutions to play their part in helping countries to deal with the impacts of climate change. These are institutions that small developing countries who are feeling the brunt of those impacts rarely get a chance to influence. They're controlled by, the decision-making is controlled by larger countries. So having a chance for these small countries to use this UN climate change process to influence those wider international finance institutions is another historic outcome from the deal.
OK, I was going to say there was a lack of progress, though, on cutting emissions made. You know, given the very different priorities between rich and poor states, was progress even possible in that area?
I think the process itself is not the only way to address emissions cuts. I think we all are aware of that, but it is important for sending the political signals of where governments see the direction of travel for markets, sending those signals to business, setting the expectations of the emissions cuts that are to come. We didn't see the strong political signals that we needed to see from this COP about ending our use of fossil fuels. What we did see, though, I think, is a strong coalition starting to emerge, really getting to grips with this big, tense problem of completely transforming the way that we use energy from the fossil fuel of the past to the green energy of the future. And that coalition includes very big players like the European Union and the US. It even includes Australia, which until a couple of years ago hadn't been a very vocal player on emissions cuts, and particularly not on getting out of coal. So while the deal wasn't agreed here, there is, I think, a strong coalition ready to bring this fight into next year's COP and setting that direction of travel to their economies, which will shape the global market as well.
Alex Scott from the climate change think tank E3G, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.